Welcome to PowerUp podcast, the podcast that seeks to empower and dismantle, giving us the power and confidence to question, deconstruct, rebuild, and expand in life. I'm your host, Amma Rouge, voiceover and multidisciplinary artist, well-being advocate, food and book geek with over 14 years of movement-centered experience.
I am your host, Ella Mesma, artist, choreographer, yogi and coach with a passion for alchemy, creativity, transformation and workplace wellness.
We recognise that we can't dismantle and empower or be empowered without first learning ourselves, diving deeper to unlearn the harmful, restrictive and unprogressive. It's an ongoing practice and journey for us all, which is why we created this podcast.
Our show features guests doing the work to enlighten, deconstruct and power up in their own magical ways.
We're going to be having conversations around the power of healing, transformation, well-being and creativity, and how they feed our personal and collective evolution, how they help us power up. In this episode, we talk about consent. We always aim to engage thoughtfully and with compassion. For anyone processing trauma around consent, we want to empower you to choose whether you listen to this episode or not. If you are affected by anything discussed in this episode, we have provided links to organisations you may find helpful in the show notes. Welcome to part 2 of the art of receiving and accepting. If you missed part 1, feel free to go and have a listen. You join us at a moment when we're discussing consent and compassion of self.
I think a big dose of compassion is necessary in all consent conversations. It's as we find our way and find the language to create agreements, we also start to notice where we haven't spoken up, where our boundaries have been crossed in the past. And it's easy to either blame ourselves or blame others. And so having some compassion for ourselves in particular around the times where we didn't speak up. And I have found in my own life and my own experiences that a lot of times I have found my limits by having, or my boundaries or my limits. We can use those interchangeably here. And I haven't found it until it's been crossed.
Yeah.
And it's that moment of, oh, that was too much. And instead of beating myself up, I can say, okay, next time I know when I get close to this edge, I can speak up, or I set a limit that is not close to that edge. And I can feel confident and comfortable in saying, I'm willing to give this much, but no more.
Exactly that.
I feel like this links into the importance of choice, links into empowerment, and actually that's empowering. The story you've just shared, that's quite empowering, that you're able to step into those situations. It doesn't mean that you have to shut down and say, I'm not going to step into those situations, but you're going to go, this is what my limit is. And that to me is something very empowering in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when I think about empowerment, I think about choice. And that we actually can't be empowered unless we are at choice.
Yeah.
And so there's and I talked earlier about this process of slowing down and noticing ourselves, noticing sensations in our body, noticing emotions that are arising. And for me, there's this process that is, for me, the definition of empowerment. And Betty Martin talks about this in her work. This process of noticing, what is it that I want? What's happening within me? Of trusting whatever impulse is arising. And we have a way of making our own desires wrong. It's too much. It's not enough. It's too sexy. It's not sexy enough. And so trusting that impulse, and then valuing ourselves, that what we want matters, and that in fact we matter.
Yeah.
And then being able to communicate that as clearly and directly as possible. And that process for me is the closest definition I've come to empowerment, and what that looks like. And it is a process, and it's an ongoing process. We don't just arrive at this place and we're empowered. It's all of those choices that we're making, and actually being able to make those choices, of knowing ourselves, knowing our desires, knowing our limits. And it's powerful when we come to that place.
And what about, Robyn, what about when we are moving from a place where we don't have choice, or we don't feel we have choice, or our choice is suffocated or limited?
Mm-hmm.
How, because you were saying that really in order to be empowered, we have to be moving from a place of choice to start with, to begin with.
Yeah, I would say it's finding the places where we do have choice, and noticing that, and in those places practicing speaking up, practicing asking for what we want. And it might be that we don't feel like we have many places where we have those choices. We might be in a job where we aren't treated well and we can't speak up because we need the paycheck. And so, are there places in your life where you can practice that choice and practice that autonomy that you have with your body? And that might be in relationship with a good friend or a family member or a partner. Where are those relationships where we can exercise that choice and use that as a playground to start practicing that, and building that choice in our body? And that process of empowerment plays out when there's something that we want. So there's something I want, and I notice, I trust, I value, I communicate. And it plays out when when we're on the other side of giving something to someone else. So tuning into our yes and our no. And it's the same process of noticing what's the impulse in me. Am I a yes? Am I a no? Am I a maybe? Do I need more information? And trusting the impulse that comes up. And it's like, okay, I'm not really, I'm kind of fuzzy. I need more information. Can you tell me more? Or I'm a no. Can I trust my no and not feel bad about saying no? And valuing ourselves, and that our limits matter.
Yeah.
And then being able to clearly communicate our yes or our no. And so that is also a process of empowerment.
Yeah.
And when we can clearly say no, then the person on the other side can better trust our yes.
Yes.
If I'm saying yes to everything, where's my limit? And can this other person trust that I can speak up when I'm actually a no? Or
Right.
am I just going along and trying to please and caretake?
Yeah.
And so we have choice on both sides of this give receive equation.
Yeah.
And that choice is important in being able to create a clear consensual agreement.
Mic drop. Yeah. Exactly. Like confetti, streamers, party poppers.
I love notice, value, trust, communicate. Ah, just what a beautiful way to practice. And I wonder to the listener, where are your places to practice? Do you have those places where you can practice, where you can notice, value, trust, and communicate? It would be really interesting to hear your thoughts. So feel free to comment, to share, to send us those messages and let us know.
And this is such a great invitation, and such an important invitation, because we all need practice at this.
Yeah.
And so finding those trusted places and people where we can even say, find a friend and say, hey, I want to practice something with you. I'm going to practice asking for what I want, and I invite you to practice, really tuning into your yes and no, and we'll do the same the other way. I invite you to practice asking for what you want, and I'm going to tune into my yes and no. And can we create this agreement together that we're going to be in this experiment with each other, and let's see what happens. And it can be that simple.
Mm-hmm.
I love
Beautiful.
that. I'm so doing that. I already know I'm doing that.
And it can be much harder than we expect.
Yeah, I know. I can already feel the resistance and the anxiety in my body. Oh my gosh, asking for what I want. I can feel it. And it's really interesting because in some ways I'm super comfortable asking for what I want. And in some situations, I realize I really struggle. And just listening to you talk there, I thought of an example recently, where it's such a basic, well, on the face of it, such a basic request. It was a request to have more help with chores, to have more help with chores. And it was so difficult for me to ask for that, just to just say this is what I need, because before I've even asked for it, I'm already feeling the answers and then the story that's going to come from the answer, and so on and so on and so forth up. So I've already laid out what's going to come from that request, or how it's going to make me feel to ask that, and what it may do to the dynamic and the equilibrium and the energy, and a whole heap of things. And actually coming back to it, it's just me trying to ask for what I need. So yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be practiced 100%. And the more, of course, the more we practice it, the more normalized it begins to feel, I imagine. So, and the more we're able to step into our power and move from a place of power, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and what you describe it's so familiar. And one of the things that I've noticed in, that whole process of asking for what I want, I start to filter my desires, and I start to anticipate, okay, knowing this person that I'm asking, what is it that I can ask for that I know that they'll say yes to, or I think they'll say yes to? So my desire might start with, some big grand thing,
Yeah,
and I whittle it down and whittle it down until it gets to a place where I feel confident that I can ask for this,
and get it. Yeah,
and I'll get it, or I won't feel so disappointed if I don't get it.
Mm.
Um,
yeah,
and so that's quite common, that we filter or we diminish what we want to a place where we're pretty sure we can get it, or we won't feel so disappointed if we don't.
yeah. Which in doing so, we're diminishing our value.
Hmm.
A lot of that may also, I recognize that may also be to do with discomfort, that not wanting to go into that place of discomfort. So how can I reduce this and reduce this and reduce this, or
Hmm.
pre-edit so it lands in a place that will then put me in the least uncomfortable space, or that will bring the least discomfort to this space. And so we sacrifice ourselves sometimes, in order to have the kind of outcome or result that we think may provide the most comfort or the most equilibrium.
And
But it's amazing how much that's kind of a screen, really.
And I think it's probably worth mentioning how we can also then step in, that we've mentioned the shadow side, how we can then step into the shadow side in a response to not having spoken up. So we do the thing that we think the other person wants, and then there's the resentment, and then we'll end up taking, you know what I mean? So how quickly we can actually kind of like swap places, trade places with the person who we're in relationship to.
Yeah, and this place of discomfort is a place of great learning and great possibility. And there's a practice that comes to mind. I'm trying to decide which track to go down because my mind is just popping in so many directions. So
wish we could gather them all.
Yeah, I'm going to pick a path, and then there are several others we could explore. But it's actually a practice, and it's a practice in discomfort. And it's actually, it's interesting because it's a practice in discomfort, and it's a practice in connecting to our pleasure. And for many people, connecting to pleasure is scarier than connecting to pain or anger or grief or some of these other emotions. Like connecting to our joy can feel really scary and vulnerable. And so there's a practice or a game that I used to play with a former partner of mine. And we called it the wanting game. And it came about because I was eating a piece of chocolate, and I love chocolate, extra dark. And my partner said, "I want your chocolate." And I noticed my whole body like getting tense, and I'm kind of shrinking back, and my mind is racing, and it's like, I don't want to give him my chocolate, but he asked for it. So, I should be generous and I should share, but I really don't want to. And all of this is going on inside of me. And then he says, "It's good to want." And my whole body relaxed. And it was like, oh, he wants it, but it doesn't mean I have to give it to him. And it was like this epiphany. And I realized how many times in my life, when someone wanted something from me, I instantly just gave it because that was what I thought I was supposed to do. And I noticed how many times in my life when I wanted something, there was either an expectation that I would get it, or this process of like whittling it down to what I thought I could get. And so we began this practice with each other of just stating what we want, and in its grandest form, without filtering, and just like throwing it out there without the other person having to pick it up and do anything about it. And with that reflection of it's good to want, it's like, oh, yeah, that's great that you want that, but nothing has to happen with it. And so we would do this game back and forth with each other of just like whatever it was we wanted, of feeling this freedom to just like own it and relish in the desire without this attachment to now I have to have it, or this place of expectation that I want it, therefore I'm going to get it. And so that practice has been so useful for me to allow myself to enjoy the pleasure of wanting. And then from that place, I can decide, okay, is this something that I really want? And then I can turn it into a request and ask for it. But it's a way to allow ourselves to enjoy what we like, what brings us joy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And there's great power in that. And it can be quite nourishing.
Absolutely. I think it's I'm linking it back to the sacral chakra and that idea of, you know, getting in touch with our pleasure and what a gift that can be. I was sharing last week that I've now started doing the first 3 days of my period. I actually take in silent, and I practice this game. I practice exactly that. What do I want? And I try not to do anything that isn't on that vibration and just really listen, because it's something we've so it's so oppressed. It's something that we're not used to doing in our society, in our world, in our, you know, in our busy lives and making money and so on, that we switch that off. So it's such a gift to be able to switch that back on. And I love that game, and I definitely want to play it with you all.
So would you both like to experiment with the I want game with me for a couple minutes?
I'm noticing. I'm
So
valuing.
pause and check in with yourself and notice what's happening in your body, and notice any sensations that arise, any emotions that might be attached to that as you ponder this question of, do I want to play the I want game? And what are you noticing, Ella?
I'm noticing that there's this kind of fuzzy feeling in my stomach, like kind of like jumping beans, getting super excited at the thought of playing this game with you. And I'm valuing
Oh, I
that.
love that. I love the image of jumping
Amazing.
beans. Amma, what are you noticing?
I'm actually interestingly noticing like a little bit of, you know, like little tummy flutters, but little like drops right at the bottom of my belly, like, oh, and then the bit of me that's like, but I really, yeah, I really want to just say what I want, like, just want it, I want to let it out. Mixture.
Such good noticing. Yeah, I'm noticing my chest opening up. I'm noticing I'm leaning in, and yeah, I'm noticing openness in my belly, and I imagine I'm feeling excited. So here's how I'll propose we do it. So let's go in a little round, and um, Amma, would you like to start? And I'll ask you what you want. And then you can ask Ella, and then Ella
Yeah,
can ask me. And we'll just do
Woo!
a couple rounds and see what comes up.
amazing.
Oh, Amma, what do you want?
I want ease.
It's good to want.
It is good to want. It is. Belita, what do you want?
I want to eat my Ayurvedic vegetable soup.
It's good to want.
It is good to want. Robyn, what do you want?
Mm. I want to lay on a white sand beach with crystal clear blue water that's warm, like that temperature where you can't feel if you're in the water or you're not. It's like the same temperature as your body, and just like float on this vast expanse of water while gazing up at the clouds in the sky.
There's some
It's
clicking fingers
so good
going
to
on.
want.
I imagine we could do this all day long.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we want Robyn to come back.
I want to come back and keep going with this conversation. I'm very much enjoying it.
It's been such a pleasure.
Amazing.
So we will be inviting Robyn back on the show.
Thank you so much, Robyn. Honestly, this has been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. And I am so happy to be here and really looking forward to coming back.
Thank you for listening. You can connect to us and our guests via the links in each episode's show notes. Before you go, we invite you to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the goodness to come. And if you enjoyed today, perhaps tell a friend to tell a friend. We are always grateful for you, our listeners, for our fabulous guests, and to everyone who has contributed to and been a part of our journey here.
Our music is by Tomo Carter. Everything else is brought to you by us, the PowerUp Power Team.
I'm Mesma.
I am Amma Rouge. And
we
are
PowerUp Podcast.